The research vessel Quiet Dawn floated in the darkness of the nebula like a wounded bird. Its lights flickered. Its engines hummed weakly. Deep inside the ship, 12 alien beings waited to die. Commander stood at the center of the bridge, her 4 thin arms wrapped around her body for warmth. The ship was getting colder. The life support system was failing, and with it, their hope of survival. She watched the numbers on the display screen fall lower and lower. Oxygen levels dropping, carbon dioxide levels rising, temperature falling. 3 days, maybe 4. That was how long they had before the air became poison. They were a gentle species. They had soft, translucent skin that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. Their bodies were thin and delicate, built for their low gravity. They had large eyes that could see in near darkness, and they spoke in voices like singing wind. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. They had never needed to be strong because the universe had always been kind to them. Until now. Turned to look at her crew. 11 beings who had trusted her to lead them safely through this mission. 11 friends who might die because she had chosen to study this nebula. The guilt sat heavy in her chest like a stone. "Any response to our distress signal?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The young communication officer shook her head. Her skin had turned pale gray with fear and exhaustion. "Nothing, Commander. The nebula is blocking most of our signal. Even if someone hears us, they might not be able to find us." The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 16 hours. 16 hours of silence. 16 hours of waiting for rescue that might never come. Closed her large eyes and tried to think. The Galactic Concord had rescue stations throughout this region of space. Surely one of them would hear their signal. Surely someone would come. Then made a sound that had never heard before. It was a gasp of pure terror. "Commander," the young officer whispered, "a ship is responding." Hope flared in his chest. Who, which station, how far away? Did not answer immediately. Her hands were shaking as she worked the communication controls. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "It is not a conquered station, Commander. The ship is coming from the Sol system." The bridge fell completely silent. Every stopped moving, every stopped breathing. The Sol system. Everyone knew what lived in the Sol system. Humans. Felt her hearts begin to race. Like every being in the galaxy, she had grown up hearing stories about humans. Terrible stories. Frightening stories. Stories that parents told their children to make them behave. Humans came from their planet Earth was a place of nightmares. The gravity was crushing, strong enough to break bones like dry twigs. The atmosphere was thick with oxygen, a gas so reactive that it could cause fires and corrode metal. Water fell from the sky in storms. The ground shook with earthquakes. Mountains exploded with liquid rock. The weather could freeze or burn or drown any creature caught outside. And somehow, impossibly, humans had evolved to survive all of it. They were heavy and dense, packed with muscle that never seemed to tire. Their bones were thick and strong. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. They could function without sleep for days at a time. They could eat foods that were poison to other beings. They kept predators as companions and called them pets. But the most terrifying thing about humans was their minds. They never gave up. They never stopped. They would chase prey across entire continents until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They built machines to fly and swim and tunnel through the ground. They split atoms and walked on their own moon. They looked at every challenge the universe threw at them and refused to accept defeat. "Are you certain it is a human ship?" asked, hoping she had misheard. "Yes, Commander. They are broadcasting in standard Concord frequencies. The ship identifies itself as the cargo hauler Dusty Miller, Human Registry. They say they are changing course to help us." A cargo hauler, not even a military vessel, just ordinary human civilians flying through space carrying goods from one place to another. And they had heard the distress call and they were coming. "How long until they arrive?" asked. 14 hours, Commander, maybe less. They say they are pushing their engines to reach us faster. 14 hours. They could survive 14 hours. Their oxygen would hold. They would not freeze. Help was coming. But what kind of help? Looked around at her crew. She could see the fear in their faces. They were all thinking the same thing. They had called for rescue and the universe had sent them. Perhaps we should tell them not to come, suggested the ship's doctor. His voice trembled. Perhaps we should wait for a conquered vessel instead. There may not be a conquered vessel, replied. We have been broadcasting for 16 hours. The humans are the only ones who answered. But Commander, they are humans. Who knows what they might do to us? We have all heard the stories. Yes, thought. They had all heard the stories. Humans were violent. Humans were aggressive. Humans had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years before they reached the stars. They ate the flesh of other animals. They celebrated competition and conflict. They were everything the peaceful were not. But what choice did they have? We accept their help, said firmly. We thank them for responding and we prepare for their arrival. Open the communication channel with shaking hands. Human vessel Dusty Miller, this is the research ship Quiet Dawn. We thank you for responding to our signal. We are grateful for your assistance. The response came after a moment. The human voice was deep and strange, speaking Concord Standard with a heavy accent that made the words sound rough and sharp. Quiet Dawn, this is Captain Samuel of the Dusty Miller. Don't mention it. We picked up your signal and we're on our way. Can you tell me what's wrong with your ship? Took over the communication. Captain, our life support system has failed. Our oxygen is running low and our carbon dioxide scrubbers are not working. We have 12 crew members. We have perhaps 3 days before the air becomes unbreathable. Copy that, Quiet Dawn. We've got an engineer on board who's pretty handy with life support systems. Sit tight and conserve your air. We'll be there as soon as we can. The channel went silent. The humans were coming. Ordered her crew to reduce their activity and breathing to conserve oxygen. She told them to rest, to stay calm, to trust that rescue was on the way. But she could see that none of them were calm. None of them could rest. They sat in the cold darkness of their dying ship, watching the clock count down the hours, waiting for the to arrive. Tried to tell herself that everything would be fine. The humans were coming to help, not to harm. They had answered a distress call like any civilized species would do. But deep in her hearts, she could not shake the fear. She had called for salvation, and the universe had sent her monsters. In 14 hours, she would learn if the stories were true. Captain Samuel sat in the pilot's chair of the Dusty Miller and rubbed his tired eyes. He was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face lined by 20 years of space travel. He had flown cargo ships across half the galaxy. He had seen things that most people never dreamed of, but he had never expected to answer a distress call in the middle of a nebula. The Dusty Miller was not a pretty ship. She was old and worn, with patches on her hull and an engine that made strange noises when pushed too hard. But she was reliable. She had carried Samuel and his crew through storms and pirates and mechanical failures. She would carry them through this too. What do we know about the, asked Marsh, the first mate. Was a short woman with strong arms and a face that rarely smiled. She had been flying with Samuel for 8 years, and he trusted her completely. When things went wrong, stayed calm. When decisions needed to be made them. She was the best first mate Samuel had ever worked with. Not much, Samuel admitted. They're from a low-gravity world, very delicate physiology, peaceful species, mostly scientists and traders, no military to speak of. So they're not a threat. No, they're just people who need help. Nodded, that was all she needed to hear. Then we helped them. Samuel smiled. That was why he loved his crew. They were good people. When someone was in trouble, they helped. It was that simple. He looked around the small bridge at the rest of his team. Peter Holt sat at the engineering console, studying the ship specifications that they had downloaded from the Concord database. Peter was a quiet man in his 40s, tall and thin with hands that never stopped moving. He could fix anything. Samuel had once watched him repair a broken engine using nothing but spare parts and determination. If anyone could save the life support system, it was Peter. Price sat at the medical station, reading everything she could find about biology. Was the ship's medic, a former Navy corpsman who had served in 2 conflicts before taking a job on a cargo hauler. She was calm under pressure, skilled with her hands, and kind to everyone she met. The crew called her Kate, and they loved her like family. Danny sat at the navigation console, plotting their course through the nebula. Danny was the youngest member of the crew, only 25 years old, with brown hair that was always messy and a smile that was always ready. He was a talented pilot, able to thread the dusty Miller through spaces that should have been impossible. Samuel saw great potential in the young man. And finally there was Oscar, the ship's cook and general helper. Oscar was 60 years old, with white hair and a round belly and a laugh that filled any room. He was technically retired, but he claimed he got bored sitting at home, so he joined Samuel's crew to see the galaxy. He made the best coffee Samuel had ever tasted. "How long until we reach them?" Samuel asked. 12 hours if we push the engines," Danny replied. "Maybe 11 if Peter can give us a little more power." Peter looked up from his console. "I can try. The old girl won't like it, but she'll do it." "Do it. Those people are running out of air." The next 11 hours passed slowly. The crew prepared for the rescue mission. Peter studied the life support systems until he understood them completely. Kate researched medical needs in case any of them were injured or sick. Danny guided the ship through the nebula's interference with careful skill. Oscar kept everyone fed and caffeinated. Samuel used the time to communicate with the ship. He spoke with Commander several times, gathering information about their situation. He could hear the fear in her voice, even through the translation software. She was afraid of him, afraid of humans. Samuel understood. He had heard how other species viewed his kind. Monsters from a nightmare planet. Beings who ate flesh and kept predators as pets and healed from wounds that should be fatal. He knew the stories were exaggerated, but he also knew that some of them were true. Earth was a hard world and humans had evolved to survive it. But survival did not mean cruelty. Strength did not mean violence. Samuel had spent his whole life proving that humans could be kind, could be gentle, could be trusted. He hoped the would give him a chance to show them. When the dusty Miller finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the quiet dawn, Samuel felt his heart squeeze with sympathy. The ship was dark and cold, barely showing any lights. It drifted lifelessly in the void, a fragile shell containing 12 frightened beings. "Open a channel," Samuel ordered. "Danny, channel open, Captain." "Vessel Quiet Dawn, this is Captain Samuel of the Dusty Miller. We have arrived. We're going to dock with your ship and come aboard to assess the damage. Please do not be afraid. We are here to help." The response came after a long pause. "We understand, Captain. We will open our docking port, please. Please be careful with us. We are not as strong as your kind." Samuel kept his voice soft and calm. "We'll be gentle, I promise." The docking procedure took 30 minutes. The Dusty Miller's old docking clamp needed several attempts to lock properly with the ship's port. But eventually the seal was made, and the 2 ships became one. Samuel, Peter, and Kate put on their environmental suits. The ship would have a different atmosphere than they were used to, thinner and colder. They would need the suits to work comfortably. "Remember," Samuel said to his team, "these people are scared of us. Move slowly, speak softly. Don't do anything sudden. We're guests on their ship and we need to make them feel safe." Peter and Kate nodded. They understood. The airlock opened with a hiss of escaping gas. Samuel stepped through first, floating into the ship's corridor. The gravity was very low, maybe 1/10 of Earth normal. He had to be careful not to bounce off the walls. The interior of the ship was beautiful in a strange way. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell. The lights were dim and blue, designed for eyes that could see in near darkness. Everything was delicate and smooth, built for beings who had never known hardship. And then Samuel saw themselves. They were pressed against the walls of the corridor as far from the humans as they could get. Their large eyes were wide with terror. Their thin bodies trembled. Their translucent skin had turned pale gray, a sign of extreme stress. Samuel's heart broke a little. They looked like frightened children. He removed his helmet slowly, carefully, showing them that he meant no threat. The air was thin and cold, but he could breathe it. He smiled at them, keeping his lips closed so they would not see his teeth. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm Samuel. We're here to fix your ship." Commander watched the humans float through her ship and felt her whole understanding of the universe shift. She had expected monsters. She had expected violent, aggressive creatures who would demand payment for their help or threaten her crew. She had spent the last 11 hours preparing herself for the worst. Instead, she got Samuel. The human captain moved through her corridors like he was walking through a temple. His steps were slow and careful. His voice was quiet and calm. When he approached her crew members, he kept his distance and made no sudden movements. He treated them with respect, with gentleness, with what could only describe as kindness. The other two humans were the same. The tall, thin one, Peter, immediately went to work on the life support system. He asked permission before touching anything. He explained what he was doing in simple words that they could understand. The female human moved among the crew with a medical scanner, checking their health. She smiled at them and spoke softly, like a mother caring for sick children. These were the terrifying, these gentle, careful beings. "I don't understand," said to Samuel as they stood outside the engineering section. "You are not what I expected." Samuel tilted his head, a gesture that was learning meant curiosity. "What did you expect?" "The stories say that humans are violent, aggressive, dangerous." Samuel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "We can be. We evolved on a hard world, Commander. We had to fight to survive. We had to be strong and tough and sometimes brutal. Those instincts are still part of us." "Then why do you not act on them?" "Because we also evolved something else. We learned to care for each other. We learned that cooperation is more powerful than competition. We learned that helping others makes us stronger, not weaker." Samuel smiled again, that strange expression that was beginning to find comforting. "The same world that made us dangerous also made us compassionate. We protect our own, Commander. And right now, you and your crew are our own." Did not know what to say. This was not in any of the stories. Peter appeared from the engineering section, his face covered in some kind of dark grease. "Captain, I've found the problem. The primary CO2 scrubbers are completely shot. The filters are saturated and the backup system can't handle the load. The whole thing needs to be replaced." "Can you fix it?" Samuel asked. "Not with their parts. The damage is too extensive. But I think I can rig something from our ship. It won't be pretty, but it should work." "Do it. Whatever you need from the miller, take it." Peter nodded and floated back toward the airlock. Watched him go, amazed. The human was going to take parts from his own ship to save hers. "Won't that damage your vessel?" she asked. "Maybe a little," Samuel admitted. "We have a backup CO2 scrubber that we can spare. We'll just have to be more careful on our way home." But that is your ship, your safety. And this is your crew's lives. I think we can manage without a backup scrubber for a few weeks." Felt something warm bloom in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as gratitude. The repairs took longer than anyone expected. Peter worked for hours, crawling through maintenance tunnels that were designed for beings half his size. His shoulders scraped against the walls. His suit tore in several places. But he kept working, kept adapting, kept refusing to give up. The other humans helped in ways that they did not expect. Kate provided medical care to crew members who were suffering from carbon dioxide poisoning. She gave them medicine and oxygen and kind words. Danny, the young pilot, stayed on the Dusty Miller and monitored both ship systems, warning Peter whenever something looked dangerous. Oscar, the old cook, sent over containers of hot food because he claimed that nobody could work properly on an empty stomach. And Samuel stayed with, answering her questions, explaining human customs, trying to bridge the gap between their species. "Why do you keep predators as pets?" asked. She had always wondered about this. Samuel laughed, a strange barking sound that startled her. "Dogs, you mean? They're not really predators anymore. We've lived with them for thousands of years. They're our companions, our friends. They love us and we love them. But they have teeth, sharp teeth." "So do I," Samuel said and opened his mouth to show her. Flinched, but Samuel just smiled. "I've never bitten anyone, Commander. Well, not since I was about 3 years old and my brother stole my toy." Did not understand the humor, but she recognized that it was meant kindly. This human was trying to make her feel comfortable. He was treating her like a friend. The hours passed. Peter finished installing the new CO2 scrubber and began working on the oxygen recyclers. Kate moved from crew member to crew member, making sure everyone was recovering from the bad air. Samuel organized, coordinated, and kept everyone calm. Found herself watching the humans with new eyes. Yes, they were large and heavy and densely muscled. Yes, they moved with a physical confidence that suggested great strength. Yes, their bodies carried scars from wounds that would have killed any. But they used that strength to help. They used that confidence to protect. They used those survival instincts to keep others alive instead of themselves. "We are almost done," Peter reported, his voice tired but satisfied. "Another hour, maybe 2, and your life support will be fully operational." "You have worked for 12 hours without rest," said. "You must be exhausted." Peter shrugged, another human gesture. "I'll rest when the job is done." "But your body needs sleep. All beings need sleep. Humans can go a while without it. We evolved that way. Sometimes our ancestors needed to stay awake for days to survive. Hunt or be hunted, you know." Peter wiped sweat from his forehead. "Don't worry about me, Commander. I've pulled longer shifts than this." Looked at Samuel, hopping for some explanation. Samuel just smiled. "Peter once stayed awake for 3 days straight to repair our engine during a solar storm. He slept for about 16 hours after, but he did it. We all do what we have to do." These beings were impossible. They broke every rule of biology that knew. They worked without rest, healed from terrible wounds, survived conditions that would kill any other species. They were exactly as frightening as the stories said. But they used their impossible abilities to save strangers. They pushed their bodies to the breaking point for beings they had never met. They gave pieces of their own ship to repair another. The stories had gotten everything wrong. Humans were not monsters to be feared. They were something far more unexpected. They were heroes. The warning came without notice. Danny's voice crackled over the communication system, tight with controlled fear. "Captain, we have a problem, a big one." Samuel looked up from where he had been helping Kate organize medical supplies. "What is it?" "Sensors are picking up a collapse in the nebula. A pocket of unstable matter is falling apart about 2 light minutes away. It's going to release a massive wave of radiation and debris, heading straight for us." Commander felt her heart's turn to ice. She knew what nebula collapses could do. The radiation alone could kill her entire crew. The debris could tear holes in the ship's hull. "How long do we have?" Samuel asked. His voice was calm but could see his body tense. 20 minutes, maybe less." Peter appeared from the maintenance tunnel, his face covered in grime and sweat. "I'm not done with the life support yet. I need at least another hour." We don't have an hour, Danny replied. Captain, the miller can survive this wave if we detach and move to a safe distance. The ship can't. Their engines are too damaged to run. Understood immediately. The humans could escape. Her crew could not. You must go, she said to Samuel. Take your ship and your crew and leave. You have done more for us than we could ever repay. Do not die with us. Samuel did not move. His eyes were fixed on some distant point, his mind clearly working through the problem. Danny, how bad is this wave going to be? Bad, Captain. The radiation levels will spike way above safe limits. Hull stress will be serious. Anyone caught in it without heavy shielding is going to get very sick. But survivable for the ships. A pause. For the miller, yes, probably. We're built tougher than the ship. We should be able to ride it out if we button up tight. And for us, for humans. Another pause, longer this time. Radiation sickness. Definitely serious radiation sickness. The kind that puts you in bed for weeks. The kind that might cause long-term problems. Samuel nodded slowly. Then he turned to Peter. How much longer to finish the repairs? An hour, maybe a bit more if I rush and make mistakes. Then don't rush, do it right. Samuel keyed his communication device. Danny, Oscar, seal up the miller and prepare for the wave. Get over here with the heavy shielding blankets. We're staying. Grabbed Samuel's arm. Her grip was weak against his dense human muscles, but she needed him to understand. No, you cannot do this. The radiation will harm you. It might kill you. Please save yourselves. Samuel looked down at her with an expression she could not read. It might have been sadness. It might have been determination. It might have been something she had no word for. Commander, he said gently, we came here to save your crew. We're not leaving until that job is done. But your lives are not worth more than yours. Samuel took her hand and held it carefully like he was holding something fragile and precious. We'll get through this. Humans are tough. We've survived worse. Arrived through the airlock carrying armfuls of thick metallic blankets. Kate began helping her distribute them among the crew members, wrapping each one carefully. These will block some of the radiation, Kate explained as she worked. Not all of it, but enough to keep you safe. The important thing is to stay calm and stay still. What about you? Asked, her voice trembling. What about the humans? Kate smiled but could see the fear behind it. We'll be okay. We're built differently than you. But saw that there were only enough blankets for the crew. The humans would face the radiation unprotected. Peter kept working on the life support system. His hands moved faster now, but still with care and precision. He muttered to himself as he connected wires and sealed joints, a constant stream of technical language that did not understand. 10 minutes, Danny reported. Almost there, Peter replied. Just a few more connections. Samuel moved through the ship, helping to seal any gaps in the hull that might let radiation through. Worked beside him, her movements efficient and controlled. They did not look afraid. They looked focused. 5 minutes. Peter pulled himself out of the maintenance tunnel. Done. Life support is back online. It's not pretty, but it'll hold. The ship's systems hummed to life. Fresh air began flowing through the vents. The temperature started to rise. After hours of cold and fear, the ship was alive again. It's working, whispered. It's actually working. 2 minutes, everyone take cover. The humans gathered together near the airlock. Samuel, Peter, and Kate sat with their backs against the wall, their bodies pressed close together. They held hands. Approached them, her own crew wrapped safely in their radiation blankets. I cannot let you do this. There must be another way. Samuel shook his head. There isn't, and even if there was, there's no time to find it. He looked at her with those strange human eyes, so different from eyes yet somehow expressing the same emotions. Take care of your crew, Commander. That's your job. Let us do ours. Why? The question burst out of before she could stop it. Why are you doing this? We are strangers. We are aliens. Why would you suffer for us?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Because you needed help. Because we could help. Because that's what we do." The wave hit before could respond. The ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed. The hull groaned under the stress of the radiation and debris, fell to the floor, her four arms scrambling for purchase against the smooth surface. It lasted for 2 minutes, the longest 2 minutes of life. When it was over, the ship was still intact. The life support was still working. The crew, wrapped in their blankets, were frightened but unharmed. The humans were not so lucky. Kate was already vomiting, her body rejecting the poison that had flooded through it. Peter had collapsed against the wall, his skin pale and sweaty, was shaking, her teeth chattering, her eyes unfocused. And Samuel was on his knees, blood dripping from his nose but still conscious, still awake, still thinking of others. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his voice rough. "Is the crew safe?" Could not speak. She could only stare at these impossible, terrifying, beautiful beings who had just absorbed lethal radiation to save strangers. Kate wiped her mouth and reached for her medical bag. Her hands were trembling, but she was already pulling out medication, already treating her, already doing her job. "We're alive," she said. "That's what matters, we're all alive." In the days that followed, the galaxy learned about what happened in the nebula. Told the story to anyone who would listen. She told it to the rescue ships that finally arrived 2 days later. She told it to the medical teams that treated the humans for their radiation poisoning. She told it to the journalists who came seeking interviews. She told it to the Galactic Concord Council when they summoned her to testify. She told them about the distress signal that went unanswered for 16 hours. She told them about the human cargo ship that changed course to help strangers. She told them about Captain Samuel and his crew, who worked without rest to repair a failing life support system. She told them about the radiation wave that should have killed everyone, and about the humans who absorbed it so that they could live. The story spread across the galaxy like fire. Species who had feared humans for centuries began to question everything they knew. They were violent, yes. They were dangerous, yes. But they were also something else, something that no one had expected. They were kind. On the medical station where the Dusty Miller crew was being treated, sat beside Samuel's bed and watched him sleep. The radiation had done serious damage to his body. The doctors said he would recover, but it would take time. Weeks, maybe months. Peter was in worse shape. His body had absorbed more radiation than the others because he had stayed in the most exposed part of the ship to finish the repairs. He was unconscious, his vital signs weak but stable. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Kate and were recovering faster. Human females, learned, tended to be more resistant to radiation damage than males, some quirk of biology that had evolved on their deadly. Kate was already up and walking, checking on her despite the doctor's orders to rest. Danny and Oscar had stayed on the Dusty Miller during the wave, protected by the ship's heavier shielding. They visited every day, bringing food and news and the kind of cheerful support that seemed to be a human specialty. "You should go home," Samuel said one day when he was awake and lucid. "You should be with your own people." Shook her head. "I cannot leave until I know you are well. You saved my crew. I owe you everything." "You don't owe us anything. We just did what anyone would do." But that was the thing. That was the truth that had learned in the cold darkness of the nebula. Not everyone would do what the humans had done. Not everyone would risk their lives for strangers. Not everyone would absorb lethal radiation so that aliens they had never met could survive. Only humans would do that. The Galactic Concord held emergency meetings to discuss the implications. For centuries, humans had been viewed as a threat. Their strength, their endurance, their terrifying resilience made them dangerous. Governments had enacted policies to contain them, to limit their expansion, to keep them confined to their own small corner of the galaxy. Now those policies seemed foolish, cruel even. Delegate of the spoke before the full council, her voice carrying through the great chamber. We have spent generations fearing the wrong things about humanity. We feared their strength, but that strength was used to save lives. We feared their endurance, but that endurance allowed them to work through the night to repair a failing ship. We feared their resilience, but that resilience let them survive radiation that would have killed any of us. She paused, letting her words sink in. The humans are not monsters. They are not threats. They are beings who look at suffering and refuse to accept it. They are beings who see strangers in danger and call them family. They are beings who would rather die than watch others perish. The council was silent. I move that we revise our policies toward humanity, Delegate continued. I move that we treat them not as dangers to be contained, but as allies to be welcomed. Because the galaxy needs more beings like Samuel and his crew. The galaxy needs heroes. The motion passed, not unanimously, but by a large enough margin to matter. For the first time in centuries, humans were officially recognized as full members of the galactic community. Samuel learned about this while lying in his hospital bed, too weak to stand but strong enough to laugh. Heroes, he said, shaking his head. All we did was answer a distress call. Sat beside him, her 4 hands folded in her lap. That is what makes you heroes, Captain. You did not think about it. You did not calculate the risks and benefits. You heard that someone needed help and you helped. That is rare. That is precious. That is heroic. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, that strange human expression that had come to love. We're just people, Commander. Regular people doing regular things. No, said softly. You are humans, and humans, I have learned, do not know how to be ordinary. When the Dusty Miller crew was finally released from the hospital, they returned to their ship and prepared to continue their cargo route. The repairs from the rescue mission had been completed by grateful engineers. The ship looked better than it had in years. Came to say goodbye. She brought gifts from her crew, a small crystal that glowed with the light of the nebula, a piece of art made by one of the scientists, and a letter signed by all 12 expressing their eternal gratitude. Samuel accepted the gifts with grace. Thank you, Commander. This means a lot. It is nothing compared to what you gave us, replied. You gave us our lives. You gave us hope. You gave us a new understanding of what the universe can be. The crew of the Dusty Miller boarded their ship. The airlock closed, the docking clamps released, and the old cargo hauler flew away into the darkness, carrying 5 ordinary humans who had no idea that they had changed the galaxy. But they had. In the years that followed, the story of the Quiet Dawn became legend. It was taught in schools across 1,000 worlds. It was cited in diplomatic negotiations. It was used to explain what humanity was really like, beneath the fear and the rumors and the ancient prejudice. Humans were dangerous. Humans were everything the galaxy had always believed. But humans were also kind. Humans were also brave. Humans would cross the void to save strangers and ask for nothing in return. And that, the galaxy learned, was the most frightening thing of all. Because you could not fight kindness with weapons, you could not contain bravery with policies, you could not stop beings who refused to let others suffer. The humans were coming. They would spread across the galaxy with their cargo ships and their rescue missions and their impossible compassion. They would answer every distress call. They would help every being in need. They would change everything they touched, not through conquest but through simple, stubborn goodness. And the universe would never be the same.